Ripple 75s. Let's go ahead and pop this. Watch this, watch this. Pop her ulti. Second time. Third time. Fourth time ulti. Fifth time ulti. Sixth time. I thought they nerfed Twisting Blades. Nah, dude, it's still good. Will tier 4 easy. Watch this guy. He's gonna get melted so fast.
The rebuilding of this world.
Stacking all the traps on this guy. See how it just gets knocked down? It's just dead. It's boss time. He almost dead. Alright, he dead. He gonna bleed out. There we go. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So this is going to be one of the best rogue build guides for kind of bossing, but you could still play out in the open world. But I'm going to show you guys some variety of clips. Obviously from the intro, we are melting bosses with this build, and that's because poison is actually super strong. I've even soloed world bosses. The game is really easy once you know how to play rogue. The rogue has insane amount of damage. However, I'm just going to warn you guys as a heads up with this build. It is not a beginner friendly, easy, chill sort of a build. You really got to keep on your toes, and you got to know when to activate your skills, because it's a very active build, as in you push a lot of your buttons or mouse keyboard. You're going to be pushing a lot of stuff. So that's a kind of a warning to this, as a lot of people just maybe saw my live over on TikTok or Twitch, and they're like, what's this build? It seems super good. You deal super good damage. You got a lot of survivability. You got like so much resource. How are you doing all those things? I'll get into all of those things, but it is a build that you're gonna have to push a lot of buttons. And you know, if you do want a beginner friendly, easy chill build, check out my Thorns Barbarian beginner guide, as well as my Necromancer pet guide that also eventually goes into Bone Spirit. But for the most part, those are going to be much more easy chill, because Rogue is a class where you're going to be up and, you know, in an enemy's face, and they are considered relatively a squishy class. But at the end of the day, you can get a lot of defenses, and I'll explain why this build is so tanky, because some people are coming in and like, how come your Rogue is able to tank all these things? Dude, I just feel like I die in one hit. Let me explain certain things. Okay, so starting right off, let's go over how the build basically plays in terms of the skills. So in terms of the skills, what we're using is Twisting Blades. Twisting Blades is by far one of the best skills in the entire game. We use this as our main source of our damage. This is our core skill. So when we attack something with our Twisting Blades, it's going to impale them, and then it's going to spin around with a legendary aspect. That spin will deal a bunch of damage, and then we'll also apply the poison. And we're really just using poison specifically for bosses, but it also applies a debuff to the enemy, so we actually take less damage and get more damage with more attack speed. But Twisting Blade is our main source of damage. Poison imbuement, we only actually need this level 1, because the scaling of this is actually much better to scale your flat damage versus scaling just poison damage, because you get a better multiplier overall. So this, we activate it. It's really good against bosses, but you could drop the skill completely if you feel like you are a-okay against bosses, or if you want to drop this, you can drop this. Now, this is a trapper build, so we are focusing in on poison trap as well as death trap. These are you can't remove these. The skills that you can swap with this are poison imbuement as well as dark shroud. But how the build works is we are going to be throwing down our poison trap, so it knocks them down, which is going to make them take more damage. There's also another node that you can get where they take more poison damage if they are able to get knocked down, because you can't just knock down every elite in the game. There are certain things that may not be able to be knocked down, specifically like world bosses, but I'm sure a lot of you guys know that. There's a little progress bar that needs to be built up, but it is part of our build, so I do need to mention that knocking an enemy down will give us massive amount of extra crit strike chance against the enemy. And then next up, we have Death Trap. So Death Trap pulls all the enemies into a very good overlap, and then what you can do with your Twisting Blades, it's going to hit multiple targets, and it just makes everything really smooth and easy. And on top of that, since it is pulling the enemy, it kind of just groups everything up nice and easy for group play as well. So I want to show off more so just like group play, or just like, you know, out in the open play versus just bossing, because if I just show bosses, people will be like, well, I bet the build sucks when you're fighting, you know, just random enemies. No, it's really good at pretty much everything in the game. In terms of defenses, we'll go over that as well, but that's the only area where Rogue in general is going to be a little bit more squishy. It doesn't have fortified like the other classes would in melee range. Then Dark Shroud just gives us extra mobility, as well as gives us some sort of damage reduction. So pretty much you can just keep on spamming your abilities, because we have a good amount of cooldown reduction that we're going to get just built off of Twisting Blades. You're seeing, like, if I activate my ultimate, I can activate my ultimate multiple times. Look, my ultimate is basically back up. You can see we activated it multiple times in a lot of these fights, but basically you just can spam these, even if it's a small monster, it doesn't really matter unless it's just like one monster, and don't waste it on it. But pretty much these abilities you're just going to activate. You throw down the poison trap, it knocks them down, and death trap groups them up. So it groups them up, then knocks them down, and then you can maybe even have another poison trap because it only has a 10-second cooldown. But as long as I'm hitting things with my twisting blades, you'll see that the cooldown reduction only really needs to hit it 2 or 3 times, and then you'll have your poison trap up again. So you can actually knock the enemy down, and it gets back up, and then it gets knocked down again. It's really, really strong at the end of the day. So that's how we're able to have a very good amount of survivability, is because the enemy is just knocked down. If the enemy's knocked down, we don't take damage, right? And so that's the explanation for like our skill bar. Now, in terms of the build, we're going to start off with Puncture. So Puncture is one of the best generators in the game, the best basic skill for most builds. You could run Invigorating, but for the most part, Puncture is excellent because it's going to, at the 3rd level, apply a slow to the enemy and apply vulnerability. There's very few things that let you get all of that really, really easy in the game. By the way, this build is mostly geared around going from 1 to 50. I'll have like a update towards like the end game guide, as there's going to be some uniques, and heck, they're nerfing things left and right. Rogue already took a nerf. By the way, the gameplay that you're seeing, this is after the nerfs. So the nerf really just came down to inner sight, but it is something that you will notice if you've been playing at like high levels against bosses. But you can still delete bosses fast enough. But it is a nerf at the end of the day, what they just did with Rogue, but it's still very strong. So anyways, what we're doing in the very beginning, put 2 points into Puncture. So 1 here, and then get the enhanced Puncture, and then just start slamming a bunch of points into Twisting Blades. But you want to put 1 point into Twisting Blades, then get enhanced Twisting Blades, then start slamming way more points into Twisting Blades. This is our main skill for our source of damage. Later, you can get close damage reduction. You can also get the heal on crit, because we're going to be scaling crit really early on. A lot of builds in Diablo 4 cannot scale crit. Scaling crit is more towards the end of the game. Essentially, once you start getting like Paragon, or not even Paragon, just pretty much that level 40, you can start thinking about getting some crit on your build. But this actually gives us a really good sustain. This is how I don't die, is getting these 2 nodes over here. You can get the close damage reduction earlier on if you want. Next up, Concussive. You do not want to put points into Concussive until you get Poison Trap with the knockdown. So you don't need to get this immediately. Again, all the crit stuff, worry about that once you're like level 35 plus. You just want to get Twisting Blades, and then you can, if you want to, you can put some points into Weapon Mastery so you get 8x more multiplier. And then later you want to get Poison Trap with Enhanced Poison Trap. You just want 1 point into them. All you're doing with the Poison Trap is just applying poison. That's all that matters. And then you're knocking them down. You want to get the knockdown. That's important. Then I like Agile. It gives us extra survivability. So after we use any of our cooldowns, we just get to have Dodge. Dodge just basically means you don't take any damage. And then we have Exploit as well as Malice. I put 1 point into each. There's a lot of stuff that's unknown currently with the damage bucket, so I'll update you guys if anything's changed, but I like to put 1 point into everything just so if there is a more multiplier on any of these damage numbers in the game, we're getting at least 1 into every single one. Next up, we are running Dark Shroud. So I like Dark Shroud. It gives us extra movement speed, or we can get extra crit. Choose the one that you want. I don't like playing Shadow Step right now. Later we can drop Dark Shroud and we can run Shadow Step. Shadow Step currently has a bug where if the enemy is on uneven terrain, as in they're higher or you're lower, it doesn't function properly. If that gets fixed, you can run Shadow Step and get the enhanced Shadow Step for 8% additional crit. I think it's fantastic. There's also the ability to get out of like a freeze, which is actually very helpful, but because it's bugged right now, I don't recommend it. Alternatively, you can run Dash if you want to, if you don't want to run Dark Shroud, but the only skills you can really swap with this build is basically Dark Shroud as well as Poison Beam. With the rest of the stuff you kind of need for the build to run properly, as is a trap build. And also we'll go into how I'm getting so much resource. So put a point into the Weapon Mastery, and then Agile, and then again 1 point into Poison Trap, 1 point into Enhanced Poison Trap, and then just 1 point overall into the Dark Shrouds, and then 1 into Exploit, 1 into Malice. Then later I get Poison Imbuement. I only need 1 point into it. The scaling of this is only a 10% extra damage, and it is technically base damage, but overall you get better scaling by getting more damage overall on everything. So these other ones where you're just getting extra like crit strike chance, it's going to be more valuable than slamming all your points into it. Even though you see the poison actually is like, I hit that enemy one or two times and they're going to bleed out. The poison damage is a damage over time, so it's more effective against bosses really than anything, but it's to apply the poison and actually want the target to stay poisoned for longer. So if I'm doing a lot of extra damage as poison, it's going to bleed the smaller enemies out faster, which I don't want. So I mean, you're killing the small enemies overall pretty fast anyways, but it actually helps out to not have that much poison damage on the smaller things. You want more poison damage on the bigger things, but at the end of the day, you only need 1 point to it. The scaling only goes by 10% per point. Then the thing that makes it really good is you have to put 1 1 point into Deadly Venom because it's required to get the other 2 that I think are really good. So Debilitating Toxins makes it so poison enemies take 15% less damage. I'm really only using the poison to apply poison, so I have these bonus perks. Then on top of that, you have Alchemic Advantage. It gives you 15% more attack speed for each enemy poison. Just as a heads up, you cannot overlap your poison on enemies. So what that means is you cannot have the same enemy poison so many times that you get that 15%. This is per target, so it's only going to be effective against smaller things, but I like it. It makes the build feel better when you're spamming your Twisting Blades on like an elite while everything else is poisoned around it. So yeah, I like it. You don't have to put 3 points into it. You could actually opt to not run this if you don't want to, but I like it. It makes the build feel better. Attack speed, cast speed, and any action RPG just make the game genuinely feel way better. Next up over here, I'm running Innovation, so that's how I get extra resource as well as second wind, giving us extra lucky hit chance. Is good because when we have lucky hit, we get a 30% chance to gain 8 energy, and so that's really nice. The next up, Trap Mastery. So when a enemy is poisoned, again, when poison or death trap activates, we can get 12% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable and crowd control enemies. Our puncture applies both, so it's really easy. And then so basically it's a 12 additional crit, massive. Then our ultimate death trap, which we activate, and you're going to see us sometimes activate death trap, and then it's going to be up again. Look at that. My death trap is on a 5-second cooldown after just using it. So this one over here, Prime Death Trap, it pulls and sucks in all of the enemies, so it's fantastic for that. And then we have the other one where we get a 10-second cooldown if it kills something. Then this is what makes the build so good, and this is why consistently I'm having a lot of resource, right? So you're seeing my resource over here. I'm going to be at max resource. I keep on popping those Twisting Blades. If I pop my ulti, I go to full energy, and on top of that, Inner Sight will give me full energy. So I'm kind of been maxing on the resources here. So Aftermath, when I activate my ulti, which sometimes is just up in like, sometimes you can activate your ultimate like 3 or 4 times in like 10-15 seconds if there's a nice grouping of enemies. So this is how it works. It's because of this. This is how I get like the infinite energy, as you guys put it, but it's not really infinite. It's close though. Like you're gonna have a big uptime. I put 1 point into Adrenaline Rush because I need it so I can get haste. Haste just lets me move faster. It's because we can gain 15% increased movement speed while we are at or above 50% maximum energy, and then we gain an extra attack speed if we are under that amount. So it kind of helps out. And then lastly, we have Exposure. So this makes it so we get to reduce the active cooldowns of trap skills by 20. And when we have a lucky hit, dealing direct damage to an enemy affected by a trap skill has a 25% chance to reduce the cooldowns or drop a cluster stun grenade so it stuns the enemies, and again, that's crowd control, so it actually helps out with some of the other effects that would, like when you hit a crowd control enemy. There you go. Now, let's go over the items that you want to go ahead and acquire. So keep in mind, this is going to be a 1 through 50 guide. There will be an update to this because certain items will not drop when you're in World Tier 2. You need to go to World Tier 3 and 4 to get some of these uniques like Shaco as well as Tamurni. These are like the best items in the game, and we'll be doing a update to one of the best items that you can acquire. But most of these you can just get literally from doing the dungeon, so it's going to be easy to acquire. Even though the build is kind of a more advanced build, it is going to be something to look out for. So starting right off, I also want to mention you can actually swap a couple skills like I mentioned before. So the skills that I would swap to would be Dash, as well as dropping the Poison Imbuement for Dash, and then Dark Shroud can be dropped if you want to run Shadow Step. These give you extra mobility, kind of makes the game feel a little bit more fun. It's kind of up to you. Play what you have, the most fun with, but Twisting Blades and Double Traps, and you need Puncture. These are like absolutely required. Anyways, starting right off, for the helmet, what I was running, and you don't have to put these in the exact same slot, although the amulet will want Aspect of Disobedience because you take less damage because you're going to stack more armor, and I think this is probably one of the best things in the game, especially because Poison actually does build up these stacks super fast. So starting right off, cheats Aspect. So you take less damage from crowd control enemies. Puncture applies it, really good. And then we have damage reduction with Aspect of Might with your basic skills. And then we have the lucky hit on the Vengeful Aspect. You making an enemy vulnerable has a chance to give you extra crit, and since you're going to apply a vulnerability real easy, you can utilize that. There's also Aspect of the Protector. This is a really good one. This one just gives you a barrier when you damage an elite. Super nice to have. Then we have a Looting Aspect. So when you become injured while crowd controlled, you gain Unstoppable. It has a cooldown, but for the most part, it just makes it so if you're frozen, you're about to die, it'll just unfreeze you. It's really nice to have, but if you want to, you can swap this for anything. There's not really a good boot like power. And then we have Blade Dancer's Aspect. Obviously, put this in your bow or your crossbow because you're going to get double the stats on it. You get it from Jalaw's Vigil in Skaz Glen. That's where you look at it. It's like in the top right. Get this ASAP. This is absolutely required. The rest of the stuff doesn't really matter too much. Next up, though, we have Aspect of Disobedience, which I mentioned before. Put this one on your amulet. This is the one that matters. This one you get from beating the campaign. boss. So yeah, it's great. I just like it because you get extra resource. Earlier on, it's kind of hard to get resource. Later, you can get a lot more resource in the game. Again, I'll update the guide when we are going to be talking about like level like 70 to 100. Then we have aspect of intercom, so we get extra damage. And then we have this one over here where lucky hit critical strikes with poison imbued skills can create a little toxic pool. Now, if you are running the poison imbuement, this one is okay. There's another different aspect that you can run where if you apply vulnerability, it has a chance to apply it to everyone near traps, or you can apply extra crowd control effects that can spread. Those are all great options. This one, aspect of bursting venoms, is okay if you want to play this because it's nice to have that little poison pool. And again, this is only if you play poison imbuement. You can drop it if you want to. And then we have Edge Master, so you can deal increased damage that is related to your primary resource. And since we usually are at relatively high resource, because of course Inner Sight gives us max resource and we get maximum damage from that. That's going to pretty much wrap it up in terms of the skills. I already went over the skills. Again, feel free to swap things. Oh, gems. We do want specifically having emeralds. That's more crit strike damage to vulnerable enemies. And then rubies, just because I prefer the flat life. And then we have skulls to give us extra armor. So that's going to wrap it up for the build guide. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like on it. If you're new here and you want to see an update to the build guide, as you know, this is going to be a beginner guide, even though it's an advanced playstyle, because it's not going to be the most beginner friendly, like I mentioned before. Beginner builds will be down below, but this is what I'm playing, and I think it's absolutely amazing. But thanks for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed the video, check the comment to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.